My name is Amelia Brooks. I'm 29 years old, and it's 2024 here in Bristol, England. If you told me one family dinner would change my entire life, how my sister saw me, how my parents spoke to me, how I saw myself, I'd have laughed. But that night, surrounded by flickering candles and polite smiles, I learned that revenge doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it simply walks through the door, calm and uninvited. Call to action. Stay till the end, because what happened that night still gives me chills. And don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories like this one. Chapter 1, Part 1. The clinking of cutlery filled the silence. Mum had gone all out, polished silverware, rosemary lamb, candles glowing against the old oak table. Our family dinners always looked warm on the outside, but they were a battlefield underneath. Across from me sat Sophie, my older sister, blonde, confident, perfectly composed. The one who always had her life together. And me, I was the one still figuring it out. Dad poured wine, smiling. So girls, any big news? That was Sophie's cue. It always was. She smiled like she'd been waiting for this. Actually, yes, I've just been promoted regional manager for Claremont Designs. Mum gasped. Oh, Sophie, that's incredible. I clapped politely. Congratulations. Her grin widened. Thanks, Amelia. It's nice to see someone clap for success. The jab was casual, sharp enough to sting, but soft enough to pass as humor. Dad chuckled, missing the tone. And you, Amelia, how's the freelance work going? Before I could answer, Sophie cut in. She's still doing, what was it again? Digital something. Digital storytelling consultancy, I said quietly. Her laugh was short. Right, so still unemployed, basically. The table fell silent. Even Mum's smile wavered. I forced a small smile. At least I'm building something that's mine. Sophie sipped her wine. Of course, darling, we all need hobbies. The laughter that followed was polite, but it burned. That was always our dynamic. Sophie shining, me shrinking. She was the overachiever, the pride of the family. I was the one they described with, she's trying her best. But that night, something shifted inside me, quiet but certain. Because what Sophie didn't know was that Claremont Designs, her precious company, had already emailed me earlier that week. They'd seen my online campaigns. They wanted me to lead the creative direction for their next national project. I hadn't signed yet, but the irony was delicious. After dinner, I slipped outside into the cold Bristol air. The garden lights flickered softly as I scrolled through my phone. There it was, the email that had changed everything. Hi, Amelia, we loved your concept. Let's discuss next steps this Friday. Friday, tomorrow. Inside, I could still hear Sophie's laughter, her voice floating through the glass doors, mocking, polished, unstoppable. But I smiled to myself, because this time I had something she didn't. The next morning, I walked into Claremont Designs' glass-walled office. Clean, modern, cold. A receptionist led me to a meeting room that smelled faintly of coffee and expensive perfume. Moments later, the door opened. Amelia Brooks, said a man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. I'm Daniel Carter, creative director. It's great to finally meet you. We talked for nearly an hour, about storytelling, emotion, purpose. For the first time in a long while, someone truly listened. When we finished, he said, You're exactly what this company's missing. I'd like to bring you on for our next campaign. You'll collaborate with our regional manager directly. I smiled, already knowing, and that is Sophie Brooks. My heart skipped. She's my sister. He looked surprised. Really? Small world. She's brilliant at logistics but a bit formal. You'll balance her out nicely. Right, I said, fighting a grin. Balance her out. By Friday afternoon, I'd signed the contract. It was official. I was Claremont's new creative consultant. And the timing, perfect. Because Sunday was Mum's birthday dinner. Same house, same table. Same sister. When I arrived, Sophie was already there, dressed in something new and expensive. She greeted me with that rehearsed warmth she used in public. "Amelia, you look refreshed, still freelancing." "Something like that," I said lightly. Dinner began with the usual chatter, Dad's work stories, Mum fussing about the food, Sophie talking about her team. Then Mum turned to me. "So, love, what have you been up to this week?" I looked at Sophie. "Actually, I've started with a new client." Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, who?" "Claremont Designs." Her fork froze midair. "Claremont?" "Yes," I said casually. "They reached out after seeing my online campaign. I'm leading their new creative project." The table went dead silent. Mum brightened. "Oh, that's lovely. Sophie, that's your company, isn't it?" Sophie forced a laugh. "It is. I just hadn't heard about that." Dad chuckled, completely missing the tension. "Well, that's brilliant. You two can work together, Brooks sisters running the place." But Sophie wasn't smiling anymore. Her shoulders stiffened, her voice thin. "Yes, brilliant." Then came the moment I'll never forget. A knock on the door. Mum got up, and a familiar voice floated in from the hall. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was dreadful." I turned. Daniel Carter walked in, holding a bottle of wine. My heart skipped. Sophie's face drained of color. "Daniel," she said. He smiled warmly. "Ah, Sophie, I didn't realize you were related to Amelia. What a talented family." Mum beamed. "You two know each other." "Of course," Daniel said. "Amelia's our new consultant. Her proposal blew us away." Sophie blinked. "She's what?" "Our new hire," he said simply. "We finalized everything on Friday." Everyone turned to Sophie. The silence that followed was glorious. Mum clapped her hands. "Well, isn't that something? Amelia, you never said you met her boss." I smiled. It just happened so quickly. Sophie's throat tightened. "You didn't mention any of this." "You never asked," I replied quietly. Daniel laughed softly, unaware of the storm beneath the politeness. "You two will make a fantastic team. Sophie, you'll see, Amelia's ideas are pure gold." Her forced smile trembled. "I'm sure they are." The rest of dinner felt like theater, everyone chatting while Sophie sat in silence, pushing food around her plate. Every compliment Daniel gave me was a twist of poetic justice. At one point, Mum whispered, "See, love, hard work always pays off." I nodded, but inside I wasn't celebrating revenge. I was tasting peace. After they left, the house grew quiet again. I stepped out into the garden, same cool air, same Bristol sky, and just breathed. For the first time in years. I wasn't the invisible one. I was the failure. I was simply me. Sophie had always believed success meant control, having the loudest voice, the biggest title, the perfect life. But I'd learned something different. Success doesn't need noise. Sometimes, it just needs truth to walk in wearing a smile. Later that night, I opened my journal and wrote one line. Revenge doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it walks through the door, carrying wine, and says your name with quiet respect. I closed the book and smiled. Sophie's words, "You'll never make it," no longer haunted me. Because the truth had already done what I never could. It exposed her pride and restored my dignity all in one dinner. And that, I realized, was the most poetic justice of all. Monday morning. The city of Bristol buzzed under a pale sky, rain threatening but holding back, the kind of day that looked calm but promised a storm. I stood outside Claremont Designs, my ID badge clipped neatly to my coat, my first official day. Inside, the office hummed, keyboards clicking, muted conversations, coffee machines hissing in the background. I'd always imagined my first corporate job would make me nervous, but instead I felt grounded, ready. Sophie hadn't arrived yet. I walked past the glass partitions, caught a few curious glances, and took my seat in the creative wing. The desk was simple, a notepad, my laptop, and a faint reflection of my own quiet smile on the computer screen. This time, I wasn't the one being looked down on. A few minutes later, her voice sliced through the calm. Amelia. I turned. Sophie stood there, immaculate as ever, heels clicking, hair tied in her signature low bun. But something in her expression had changed. The usual confidence was there, but underneath it, a flicker of uncertainty. Morning, I said softly. She glanced around. You're early. I like to prepare. Her jaw tightened slightly. Good, just make sure you follow our protocols. Claremont's not exactly a hobby project. I smiled. Of course, regional manager. Her lips twitched. She didn't like hearing the title spoken out loud, not from me. Before she could reply, Daniel Carter stepped out of his office. Morning, team, he called cheerfully. Sophie, Amelia, good to see you both. Let's have a quick sync about the new campaign, shall we? Sophie straightened her shoulders. Absolutely. Daniel gestured toward the glass meeting room. After you, Amelia. For the first time, Sophie was the one following my lead. The meeting began. Slides glowed on the wall, showing my proposed concept, design with a story. It was about connecting emotion with aesthetics, giving the brand a human voice. As I spoke, Sophie sat stiffly, tapping her pen against the table. Daniel nodded, impressed. Brilliant work, Amelia. This is the direction we've been missing. Thank you, I said, keeping my tone calm. He turned to Sophie. You'll handle logistics on Amelia's rollout plan, right? Of course, she said tightly. I'll make sure her vision is executed properly. Vision, the word almost choked her. The meeting ended with polite smiles, but as soon as Daniel left, Sophie leaned closer. Don't think this changes anything, she said under her breath. I met her gaze. It already has. The following days unfolded like a quiet play, one where every scene carried a subtle shift. At lunch, colleagues began stopping by my desk, complimenting the new campaign visuals. It feels fresh, they'd say, real. Even the interns, who once lingered around Sophie for approval, started seeking my input. She noticed. Every time someone laughed near my desk, her eyes flicked up, sharp, irritated, threatened. It wasn't about power. It was about presence. And she'd lost hers. By Thursday, the tension had thickened. Daniel called for a full department meeting to review the campaign progress. The room was full, designers, strategists, coordinators, and the air buzzed with quiet anticipation. I presented the next phase of my plan. When the slides ended, there was a pause, the good kind. Daniel smiled. This, everyone, is storytelling at its best. Amelia, your work's outstanding. I think we'll move forward with your proposal company-wide. Applause followed, soft but genuine. Sophie didn't clap. Instead, she spoke, carefully, but with that same tone she used at family dinners. While I agree it's creative, we should be cautious. It's risky to let someone without corporate experience lead such a major rollout. The room went silent. Daniel frowned. Risky. She nodded slightly. We're an established brand. We don't usually hand big projects to freelancers. I cut in gently. I'm not a freelancer anymore. I'm Claremont's creative consultant. Daniel smiled almost proudly. Exactly. Amelia's one of us now. And that was the moment Sophie realized she was losing control. After the meeting, she stormed into my workspace. Why are you doing this? She hissed. Doing what? Trying to overshadow me. I closed my laptop slowly. Sophie, you overshadowed me my entire life. I'm just standing where I belong. Her voice dropped. You think this will last? You think a few nice words from Daniel will change anything? I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the sister I envied. I saw a woman, terrified of losing the pedestal she'd built out of my silence. It's not about changing things, I said quietly. It's about balance. She stepped back, flustered. You've changed. Maybe I finally stopped apologizing for existing. Friday came. The campaign launch was a success. Engagement doubled within hours, and social media buzzed with praise. Daniel gathered the team that afternoon, grinning. "This is incredible. Amelia, you've done wonders. Sophie, great coordination. Let's celebrate tonight, everyone, my treat." Applause, laughter, relief. Sophie forced a smile, but her eyes were distant. That evening, we all ended up at a quiet rooftop bar overlooking the river. The city lights shimmered on the water, the air smelling faintly of rain and champagne. Daniel raised his glass. To new beginnings, and to Amelia for reminding us that creativity has no title. Everyone clapped. I smiled, a little embarrassed. Sophie lifted her glass half-heartedly. To teamwork. The toast faded, conversation resumed, and for once I didn't feel like the background noise. I felt seen. Later that night, as people drifted away, Sophie stayed behind. She walked up beside me, her voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Amelia," she said, "I didn't mean what I said that night at dinner." I looked at her. "You meant it then, that's enough." She exhaled slowly. "It's strange, isn't it, watching your little sister succeed where you didn't expect her to?" There was no malice in her tone this time, just exhaustion. I smiled gently. "It's not a competition, Sophie. It never was." For a moment, her guard dropped. Then she nodded, forced a faint smile, and walked away. When I got home, I poured a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the city lights blur in the drizzle. The past few weeks had felt like a quiet storm, one that didn't destroy, but cleansed. Sophie hadn't been beaten. She'd been revealed to herself most of all. And me, I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing peace. Sometimes, the real power isn't in fighting back. It's in staying still long enough for the truth to do it for you. The following Sunday, Mum called. "You know, love," she said softly, "Sophie told us what happened at work. She's proud of you, though she'll never say it outright." I smiled. "That's okay, I don't need her to." Mum paused. "You've changed, Amelia. You sound lighter." "I am." After we hung up, I opened my journal again. Revenge doesn't need anger. It needs patience. Because sometimes the loudest way to prove someone wrong is to live right. I closed it, placed it on my nightstand, and let the silence fill the room. The same silence that once made me feel invisible now felt like peace. And I realized, maybe the sweetest revenge wasn't proving Sophie wrong. It was becoming someone who no longer needed to. They say silence can be louder than words. I never believed that until people started hearing my silence more than Sophie's noise. 2 weeks after that dinner, life in Bristol carried on as usual, or at least it pretended to. But something had shifted. My phone buzzed more than it used to, colleagues asking for advice, clients requesting my input directly. The whispers that once followed me were now following Sophie. At the office, I could sense it, the change in air, the way people greeted me with genuine warmth and her with polite distance. Sophie worked for Haldon & Co., one of Bristol's top architectural firms. I'd started freelancing for them months earlier, helping with design copy and client presentations. What Sophie didn't realize was that the small favor her boss did for me, the one that humiliated her at dinner, was only the beginning. One rainy Thursday, I walked into the firm for a meeting. Sophie was already there, standing by the reception desk, adjusting her blazer like armor. Her face stiffened the moment she saw me. "Amelia," she said, her tone clipped, "you're early." "Just wanted to be professional," I replied lightly. "You taught me that, remember." Her jaw tightened. The receptionist, a kind woman named Ellen, smiled warmly at me. "Morning, Amelia. Meeting room B is ready. Can I get you a tea?" I glanced at Sophie. "Just water, thank you." Even the small courtesies seemed to favor me now. During the meeting, Sophie presented her proposal, confident, sharp, polished. But when her slides opened, half of the visuals were missing. Her assistant fumbled, trying to fix the file. The client looked unimpressed. Then my turn came. I plugged in my laptop, every slide perfectly formatted. I spoke with calm assurance, just like I'd practiced. I wasn't competing, I was simply prepared. But I could feel Sophie's eyes burning into me. By the end, the client smiled. "Excellent clarity, Amelia. You've got a gift for framing ideas." "Thank you," I said softly. Sophie's smile didn't reach her eyes. That evening, I went home to my small flat near Clifton. It was raining again, a steady, cleansing kind of rain. I lit a candle by the window and opened my journal. "Revenge isn't always destruction," I wrote. "Sometimes it's exposure of truth, of character, of arrogance." I didn't want Sophie to fall. I just wanted her to see what it felt like to stand where I had once stood, invisible, underestimated, but still breathing. Days passed. Word spread that Halden & Co. had offered me a short-term consultancy contract. A proper one, signed, sealed, respected. When Sophie found out, she didn't say anything directly, but Mum did. "Your sister mentioned you're doing well at her firm," Mum said over Sunday lunch. "She's surprised, I think." I smiled faintly. "It's just work, Mum." But we both knew it wasn't just that. It was balance, slowly restored. One Monday morning, Sophie came into the office late. Her eyes were tired, her tone brittle. I almost pitied her, almost. She approached me by the coffee machine. "Amelia, can we talk?" "Of course." "I didn't mean what I said at dinner," she muttered. "It was just frustration." I looked at her, steady and calm. "You called me a failure, Sophie. That wasn't frustration, that was how you saw me." She blinked, lips parting as if to protest, but no words came. "I'm not angry," I continued. "I just stopped expecting kindness from you." Then I walked away, no drama, no raised voice, just silence. It was that silence that followed her through the rest of the week. At the firm's next team meeting, the CEO praised my presentation. "Amelia, your layout for the Sheffield project was brilliant. We'd like you to lead the next client pitch." Sophie's pen stilled mid-note. Lead. Her boss had just promoted me, even temporarily, above her. The room applauded. Sophie clapped too, mechanical, detached. But when our eyes met, hers were full of something I hadn't seen before, not hatred, not jealousy, fear. That evening, she cornered me by the lift. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said through clenched teeth. I exhaled slowly. "Sophie, it's not a competition, you just made it one." Her laugh was hollow. "You've no idea how hard I've worked for this firm." "And you think I haven't," I said quietly. "You just never noticed." The lift doors opened, and I stepped in. "Good night, Sophie." The doors closed before she could reply. At home, I brewed chamomile tea and stared at the Bristol skyline. I realized then that revenge wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about showing who you truly are when they stop believing in you. That night, I slept peacefully. But peace, I learned, never lasts long. A week later, Sophie's project collapsed. The client pulled out due to presentation inconsistencies. Rumor had it that Sophie had delegated too much, assumed too much. Her boss was furious. She came to me privately that afternoon. "Amelia, between us, I need to know if Sophie's distracted. You've worked with her recently." I hesitated. "She's capable, just overwhelmed." He nodded, reading between the lines. When he left, I sat there quietly, realizing the irony. For years, Sophie had spoken for me. Now people were asking me to speak for her. The next morning, Sophie didn't show up. Her desk sat empty, her mug untouched. Later that afternoon, I got a text from her. "Need a break, don't worry about me." I stared at the message for a long while, then typed back. "Take care of yourself." And for the first time, I meant it. Days rolled by. I focused on my work, my peace, my space. Yet sometimes, late at night, I'd think of her, the sister who once towered over me like a shadow, now swallowed by her own pride. Mum called one evening. "She's staying with me for a while," she said softly. "She's quiet, different." "Good," I murmured. "Maybe silence will help her too." Weeks later, during a company event, my name was called for an award, Outstanding Contribution in Client Relations. The room erupted in applause. I stood there, smiling humbly, but inside a quiet fire burned. Because I remembered the girl sitting at that dinner table, the one who was called a failure, who bit her tongue instead of fighting back. She didn't disappear, she evolved. When I left the event, I received a message from Sophie. "Congratulations, I saw the announcement, you deserve it." It was simple, sincere maybe. I didn't reply, not out of bitterness but out of peace. Some stories don't need an ending, they just need balance. And that night, as I walked through the Bristol rain, I realized something profound. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't making someone pay, it's showing them you never needed to. Rain fell again that morning, soft, endless, and familiar. Bristol always looked different under rain, gentler, quieter. It reminded me of how storms could be beautiful when you stopped fearing them. 3 months had passed since Sophie left Haldon & Co. The office moved on, projects shifted, and so did I. My name was now on client emails, not as freelancer, but as project consultant. I'd stopped waiting for her apology, but fate, it seemed, hadn't finished writing our story. It was a Friday afternoon when I saw her again. I was leaving a meeting, clutching a file under my arm, when the lift doors opened, and there she was, Sophie. Same hazel eyes, same neat hair, but dimmer somehow. She looked smaller. "Amelia," she said, voice hesitant. "Sophie." A pause. The air between us felt heavier than the clouds outside. "I came to drop off some documents," she murmured. "Freelance handover." I nodded. "You're consulting now." "Trying to," she gave a dry laugh. "Not everyone wants to hire the woman who lost Sheffield." Her attempt at humor fell flat. I didn't smile, not out of spite, just out of truth. We stood in silence as the lift hummed. Then she spoke again. "I heard about your promotion." "It's temporary," I replied. "Still," she said quietly, "Dad would have been proud." That name, Dad, stung. He'd always been the one who told us to look out for each other. And yet, somewhere along the way, she'd stopped. "I hope you're doing better," I said softly. She nodded, eyes glistening. "I'm learning to listen." The doors opened, and she stepped out first. That was Sophie's way of saying sorry, without saying it. Later that week, I found an envelope on my desk. No name, just neat handwriting. Inside was a folded note. "You were never a failure. I just didn't want to see you succeed before me." "Yes." I sat there for a long time, reading those words again and again. They didn't fix anything, but they were real. And real was enough. Still, karma works in silence. The next day, during a meeting, Sophie's former boss, Mr. Haldon, mentioned casually, "We received a new pitch from a freelancer, someone called Sophie Brooks." My pen paused mid-note. He looked at me. "You know her, don't you?" "I do," I said slowly. "Well," he continued, "her proposal lacked structure, but she's talented. Needs guidance. Maybe she'd do better under your supervision." My heart thudded. Under my supervision. The irony was almost poetic. That afternoon, I walked home along Park Street, rain misting the windows of the cafes. My reflection looked different now, not stronger, not colder, just clearer. For years, I'd been her shadow. Now she was walking in mine. I didn't feel joy, just justice, quiet, balanced, inevitable. Monday arrived. Sophie came in, part-time consultant on a new client pitch, reporting to me. "Morning," I greeted her. She nodded, awkwardly clutching her files. "Morning." The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was dignified. Two sisters, facing the same mirror, both forced to see what they'd become. We worked together, cautiously, almost like strangers. In the first meeting, Sophie spoke too fast, trying to prove herself. I noticed her shaking hands, the way her voice cracked slightly when the client questioned her idea. I stepped in, calm and measured. "What Sophie means," I said gently, "is that the design allows flexibility. It's adaptable, not limited." The client nodded, impressed. Sophie glanced at me, surprised. That was the first time I realized revenge didn't always mean watching someone fall. Sometimes, it was standing tall enough that they had to look up to you. Weeks passed. Our work rhythm found strange harmony. We weren't sisters again, not yet, but something human returned between us. She stopped being defensive, I stopped being guarded. Still, the world has a cruel sense of timing. At the next board review, Halden praised my leadership. "Amelia, you've exceeded expectations again. We're offering you a permanent role, head of client strategy." The room clapped. Sophie smiled faintly, proud and wounded all at once. Later, as the applause faded, she whispered, "You deserve this, every bit of it." I turned to her. "Do you mean that?" "Yes," she said quietly. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for every time I made you doubt yourself." I looked at her, really looked, at the sister who once mocked me, now standing there humbled but honest. Maybe this was what poetic justice looked like, not punishment, perspective. That night, I went for a walk by the Clifton Suspension Bridge. The city lights shimmered on wet pavement, and I thought of everything that had brought me here, the humiliation, the silence, the slow rise. For the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt gratitude. Because without her cruelty, I'd never have found my strength. Without the storm, I'd never have seen the view. A week later, Sophie handed me her final report. "I'm moving on," she said softly. "Got an offer from a small firm in Bath." I smiled. "That's good, fresh start." She hesitated. "You don't hate me anymore, do you?" I shook my head. "No, Sophie. I stopped hating you the day I realized you couldn't control who I become." Her eyes welled up. "Thank you for not humiliating me when you could have." "I didn't need to," I said simply. "You learned on your own." She smiled weakly. "You've changed." "No," I replied. "I just stopped apologizing for who I am." That evening, after she left, I opened my journal again. Revenge is never about destroying someone else. It's about building yourself so high, they can't reach you, only respect you. I closed the notebook and watched the rain fall softly against the glass. The girl they once called a failure had become a lesson, not just for Sophie, but for herself. Because sometimes, revenge isn't fire. It's reflection. And when the storm finally ends, it leaves behind the clearest sky. The first frost of December glazed the windows of Bristol like a secret, quiet, beautiful, and cold. Amelia Brooks stood by her office window, a cup of Earl Grey in hand, watching the city stretch beneath the pale sky. Just a few months ago, she would have been stuck in traffic on her way to a 9-to-5 that drained her spirit. Now, she was the one people waited for in conference rooms. Her presentation, a creative overhaul for a major fashion brand, had just gone viral on LinkedIn. Her name was suddenly being whispered in meetings she wasn't even attending. Invitations flooded her inbox. PR companies, magazines, podcasts, all wanting the story of the woman who turned humiliation into triumph. But Amelia didn't reply. Not yet. Her rise was quiet, controlled. She had learned that true revenge didn't need a microphone, it just needed results. By midweek, the company's winter gala invitations went out. Everyone was buzzing. The event wasn't just an end-of-year celebration. It was where promotions were hinted, alliances built, and reputations measured. When Amelia's name appeared on the special recognition list, the office erupted. Her colleagues clapped. Her manager, Daniel, smiled proudly. Even the HR head, who had once overlooked her for a project, came to shake her hand. Amelia thanked them all politely, but inside, she felt a strange stillness. She wasn't chasing applause anymore. She was chasing peace, and yet power seemed to chase her now. Across the city, Sophie sat in her flat, scrolling through her phone. There it was again, Amelia's name in another company post. Her chest tightened. Sophie had returned from her temporary sabbatical, but work hadn't been the same. People were kind but cautious. Her boss, Mr. Turner, treated her professionally but distantly. The sparkle she once carried in meetings was gone. Her laughter, once the loudest in the office, now echoed off empty walls. And every time someone mentioned Amelia's success, She felt a sting that went deeper than envy. It was guilt, shame, and something close to grief. That dinner night still haunted her. The way she'd called Amelia a failure. The way silence had swallowed her after her own boss walked in and praised Amelia instead. Now, Sophie avoided mirrors. She didn't like the person she saw anymore. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom at the Bristol Grand shimmered under crystal chandeliers. Gold drapes, laughter, champagne. It was a night made for elegance and exposure. Amelia entered in a deep emerald gown, minimalist yet commanding. Her hair pinned, her confidence effortless. Cameras caught her as she stepped in beside Daniel, who whispered, "You're the quiet storm of the company tonight, Amelia. Everyone's watching." She smiled faintly. "I'm used to being watched," she said. The evening unfolded in a blur of speeches and applause. When Amelia's name was called for Innovator of the Year, a hush swept the room before the cheers began. She walked to the stage, graceful, calm, luminous under the lights. But among the clapping hands, she noticed one still figure near the back. Sophie. Her sister. Uninvited, unannounced. Standing silently in the corner, dressed in muted gray, watching. Their eyes met. The room, for a fleeting second, disappeared. After the ceremony, Amelia stepped outside onto the terrace, needing air. The December night bit softly at her skin. She could still hear music and laughter behind her, but she wasn't really there anymore. A voice came from the shadows. "You look incredible." It was Sophie. Her tone wasn't sharp this time. It was fragile, almost human. Amelia turned. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," Sophie's voice cracked. "I saw your name everywhere. I had to see it for myself, to see you." Amelia folded her arms. "So you came to congratulate me, or to remind yourself what you lost?" Sophie looked down. "Both." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not cruel. "I've replayed that night 100 times, Sophie whispered. "What I said, what I did, I thought success made me better, but all it did was make me hollow." Amelia stared at her for a moment, then turned back toward the city lights. "Funny thing about failure," she said softly. "It's not the opposite of success, it's the path to it." For the first time, Sophie didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just nodded, eyes glistening, lips trembling. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Amelia took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. "Forgiveness isn't something you deserve. It's something you learn to live without until you earn it." She walked away, not angry, not proud, just complete. Sophie remained there on the terrace, watching the woman she'd once belittled walk back into the light. She realized then that revenge didn't always come with fire. Sometimes it came wrapped in elegance, in poise, in quiet power that spoke louder than words ever could. Over the next few weeks, Amelia's name continued to rise. A London firm approached her with a lucrative offer. International clients wanted consultations, but behind every achievement, she felt a whisper of restraint, a reminder of who she used to be. She often visited the same cafe near the river where she'd cried months ago after Sophie's humiliation. Now, she'd sit there with her laptop, the barista smiling when he saw her. "You're here almost every day now," he'd say. "I guess I like consistency," she'd reply, half smiling. But one evening, while leaving the cafe, she saw Sophie again, handing out charity flyers with a small local group. Her eyes were tired, but her face looked softer, gentler. For a moment, Amelia paused. Part of her wanted to walk away, to keep the distance that victory had given her. But another part, quieter and braver, made her step forward. "Helping others now," Amelia said. Sophie turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "Trying to, it feels real." Amelia nodded. "Good, maybe that's where healing starts." Sophie blinked away tears. "Does this mean we're okay?" Amelia's lips curved in the faintest smile. "Not yet, but maybe one day." That night back home, Amelia looked at the framed photo on her desk. Her and Sophie as children, muddy shoes, messy hair, laughing freely. She touched the glass lightly. In that moment, she realized something deeper than revenge. That power without peace is just another kind of prison. And though the world now saw her as unstoppable, Amelia Brooks understood. The real victory was never about proving Sophie wrong. It was about proving to herself that she didn't need anyone's validation to be enough. The frost outside her window began to melt. A new chapter was quietly forming, one that didn't begin with vengeance, but with understanding. The morning light over Bristol was soft, almost deceptive. It carried that quiet warmth which hides the truth that winter isn't done yet. Amelia Brooks stood before the mirror, fastening a silver pendant around her neck, a gift from the company's CEO after her latest feature in the Times. The headline had read, "From failure to force, the woman who redefined corporate calm." Every word felt surreal. But instead of pride, Amelia felt an unease she couldn't name. Her phone buzzed again. Another email, an invitation from a London talk show. Another interview request. Another LinkedIn article using her story as inspiration. She took a slow breath. "Careful, Amelia," she whispered to herself. "Don't let them turn your silence into spectacle." At work, things had changed. The boardroom didn't intimidate her anymore. If anything, her presence altered its air. When she entered meetings now, people straightened their posture. Her calm confidence had become its own kind of power. Daniel leaned over during a briefing. "You're aware the London office wants you to lead the European creative team, right?" Amelia blinked. "That's not official yet." He smiled. "It's as close as it gets." A ripple of curiosity moved through her chest, ambition flickering beneath restraint. London meant prestige, new faces, more influence. But it also meant exposure, and she'd learned that exposure can burn even the strongest. That evening, as she left the office, a black Merced slowed beside her. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a familiar face, Marcus Langford, a well-known brand strategist from London, tall, impeccably dressed, and disarmingly smooth. "I was hoping I'd catch you," he said with a charming grin. "I saw your campaign pitch online, brilliant work." Amelia smiled politely. "Thank you, Marcus. I didn't know you were following my work." "Oh, everyone's following you now," he said, eyes glinting. "Listen, I'm hosting a private networking event in London next Friday. You belong there." There was something magnetic in his tone, the kind of charisma that draws people in before they even realize they've stepped closer. "I'll think about it," she replied softly. He smirked. "Don't think too long. London loves a rising star." The car rolled away, leaving her reflection shimmering faintly in the dark window. For the first time in a long while, Amelia felt that old thrill of being noticed, the same kind she'd once mistaken for validation. But this time, she was cautious. Friday arrived like a test she hadn't studied for. The London event was held at a rooftop venue overlooking the Thames. Golden lights spilled across the city, champagne glasses glistened, laughter mingled with ambition. When Amelia entered, heads turned, not because she tried to stand out, but because grace often does quietly. Marcus greeted her near the balcony. "Amelia Brooks, the woman everyone's talking about." She smiled modestly. "Let's not exaggerate." He leaned closer. "You underestimate your gravity. That's what makes you dangerous." The night unfolded like a slow waltz of power. Conversations about strategy, influence, and media circles blurred together. People wanted selfies, quotes, advice. And for a fleeting moment, Amelia felt the pull, the intoxication of being seen. But when she stepped aside to catch her breath, she overheard two young women whispering nearby. "She's the one whose sister humiliated her, right?" "Yeah, wild how she turned it around. But you can tell she's calculating every move." Their words sliced quietly, almost invisible, but Amelia felt them. She wasn't angry, she was reminded. That night, as Marcus offered her a glass of champagne, she declined gently. "No, thank you. I've had enough attention for one evening." He raised a brow. "You're not like the others, are you?" Amelia smiled faintly. "No, I already learned what happens when you chase approval. It never stops running. She left before midnight, heels clicking softly on the marble floor, like punctuation marks to her resolve. Back in Bristol, life regained rhythm, but Sophie, she'd been changing too. She joined a non-profit design group, helping underprivileged students learn digital skills. Her laughter was quieter now, but real. Sometimes she'd text Amelia articles or random photos of old family places, never asking for anything, just trying. One day, a small parcel arrived at Amelia's office. Inside, a framed photo of them as kids, covered in fingerprints from handling. No note, just a quiet gesture of memory. Amelia placed it beside her computer, next to a note she'd written months ago. Success without peace is just another form of failure. Weeks passed. Amelia's projects grew bigger, her schedule filled with calls, interviews, collaborations. She began working closely with Marcus on a cross-brand campaign, their synergy effortless but charged, a constant dance between respect and tension. He once told her over coffee, "You've got this quiet strength, the kind that terrifies people who rely on noise." She smiled, "And you've got this charm that hides how much you calculate everything." He laughed, "Fair enough." It was professional mostly, but she could feel the line blurring ever so slightly. Marcus wasn't like the others. He didn't flatter her, he studied her. And deep down, Amelia feared that being understood was more dangerous than being admired. One late night, while reviewing designs, Daniel stopped by her office. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Not in a bad way, just sharper." Amelia looked up from her laptop. "Success does that." He hesitated, or maybe it reveals what was always there. His words lingered long after he left. Was she becoming what she once despised, someone defined by control and validation? That thought haunted her. The next morning, Amelia visited her favorite riverside cafe. She ordered tea and sat by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Across the street, she saw Sophie again, this time leading a group of volunteers, soaked in rain but smiling. Her clothes were plain, her joy genuine. Amelia watched quietly. And for the first time, she realized Sophie had found something Amelia hadn't yet, freedom from the need to prove herself. She opened her journal and wrote, "Revenge gave me closure, but grace might give me peace." Days later, she stood before the London board, ready to sign the contract for her promotion. It was everything she'd worked for. Power, recognition, status. But as she looked down at the pen in her hand, she hesitated. Marcus noticed, cold feet. She smiled faintly, just thinking. About what? Whether becoming bigger means becoming better, or just louder. He tilted his head, intrigued. "So, what will you do?" Amelia looked out the window, the city skyline reflecting in her eyes. "I'll lead," she said, "but not at the cost of myself." She signed, but not for approval. She signed to prove that ambition can have integrity. That evening, she sent Sophie a short message. "We're both learning, just in different ways. Proud of you." Minutes later, Sophie replied, "And I'm proud of the woman I called a failure. Turns out I was wrong about you and about me." Amelia smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Outside, the rain stopped. The city lights shimmered on wet pavements like scattered hope. She whispered to herself, "Revenge isn't the end. It's the mirror you look into before you decide who you truly want to be." The city had begun to know her name. Not just in whispers at work or murmurs in the office lift, but in bold type across newspapers, business panels, and podcasts. Amelia Brooks, the woman who turned humiliation into grace. The face of calm power. The story of resilience that everyone wanted a piece of. Her rise had become a template discussed in workshops, shared on LinkedIn, even cited in a TED Talk she hadn't approved. At first, she ignored it. Then, she tolerated it. Until she realized she was no longer owning her story, the world was. One gray Thursday morning, as fog drifted across the Avon River, Amelia arrived at the office to find Daniel waiting by her desk, pale, uneasy. He held his phone out silently. On the screen, a trending article titled, "Was Amelia Brooks, Viral Success Built on a Lie?" Her heart lurched. The article had screenshots, old photos from Sophie's social media, snippets from that fateful dinner night, twisted captions, and a cropped video someone had secretly recorded where Sophie called her a failure. The headline suggested Amelia had used the humiliation to market herself, as if her success was a crafted sympathy campaign. By noon, the comments section was brutal. Some defended her. Others called her manipulative, calculating, too calm to be genuine. It didn't matter that none of it was true. In a world that thrived on spectacle, truth was too quiet to trend. Daniel sighed heavily. "I already spoke to PR. We can manage this, issue a statement, deny it." Amelia stared at the screen, her throat tight. "And feed the noise." "You can't stay silent. It'll look like guilt." She looked up calm but hollow-eyed. "Or it'll look like strength." He shook his head. "This isn't the time for pride, Amelia." "It's not pride," she said softly. "It's principle." By afternoon, journalists began calling. Messages from acquaintances poured in, the same people who'd once praised her now offering advice. She muted her phone and stepped outside into the drizzle. The street smelled of rain and metal, sharp, grounding. For a moment, she wanted to cry, but tears felt too small for what she felt. This wasn't heartbreak. It was déjà vu, a mirror of that night when Sophie had broken her publicly. Except now, it wasn't one dinner table. It was the whole world. That evening, Amelia sat on her sofa, scrolling through comments that cut deeper than they knew. She planned it all. Public humiliation as a PR move, cold. Typical corporate strategist, emotionless. Then one comment stopped her. Even if she planned it, she still worked for it. A small, anonymous voice, defending her with logic, not pity. She smiled faintly, though her eyes burned. She thought of Sophie, how it must feel to watch the same internet that had once mocked Amelia now turn on her. Would Sophie be relieved, or worried? She didn't have to wonder long. A knock came at the door. When she opened it, Sophie stood there coat-soaked, breath uneven. "I saw the news," she said quietly. "They've twisted it, I'm so sorry." Amelia blinked. "Why are you sorry?" "Because I started it," Sophie said. "That night, my words, my pride, they created this story. And now it's being recycled, just with a different villain." Amelia's voice cracked slightly. "I forgave you." "I know," Sophie whispered, eyes shining. "But forgiveness doesn't erase the ripple, it just changes how it ends." They stood there, silent, rain drumming on the window. For the first time, the distance between them didn't feel like revenge. It felt like consequence. 2 days later, Amelia returned to the office. People stared but didn't speak. The energy had changed, quiet sympathy laced with curiosity. As she stepped into the lift, 2 junior analysts lowered their voices, not low enough. She looked so calm. Maybe that's her strategy. The lift chimed, doors opening to the top floor, where Marcus Langford waited. "Rough week," he said lightly, walking beside her. "I've had better," she replied. He smiled, tone dropping. "You know, controversy isn't always bad. Publicity is currency if you use it right." Amelia stopped, turning to face him. "You sound like the kind of man who profits from noise." He shrugged. "Noise gets attention, attention sells." Her eyes sharpened. "Not everything is for sale." He studied her a moment, intrigued, perhaps even impressed. "You're rare, Amelia, but even rare things break under pressure." "Then I'd rather crack quietly than shatter loudly." She walked away, heels echoing like punctuation on marble. That night, she drafted a public statement, not through PR, not polished. Just her words. "I didn't build success on sympathy. I built it on silence, the kind that listens, learns, and rebuilds. If people see calculation in that, maybe it says more about the world than it does about me. She posted it. No hashtags, no drama, just truth. Within hours, thousands shared it. Some mocked. Some applauded. But one thing changed. Her silence turned into clarity. Even Sophie shared it with 3 simple words. Proud of you, sis. A week later, Amelia walked into the studio for a scheduled interview, her first since the article. The host smiled warmly. Amelia, people have called you many things, strategic, calm, mysterious. How do you respond to being misunderstood? She smiled faintly, eyes steady on the camera. Misunderstanding is part of being seen, she said. You can't control how people interpret your story, only how you carry it. The interviewer nodded, impressed. And what about your sister? She's been mentioned a lot in all this. Amelia's voice softened. My sister and I, we've both changed. Life has a way of humbling us differently. Sometimes you fall to learn compassion. Sometimes you rise to remember grace. The room fell silent. The interviewer blinked, then smiled. That clip would later go viral. But Amelia didn't check the numbers. She didn't need to. For the first time, she wasn't chasing redemption, she was living it. That night, as she walked home through the quiet Bristol streets, Christmas lights glowed faintly in the windows. She thought about everything, the pain, the press, the progress. Her story was no longer about revenge or even resilience. It was about ownership. Because no matter how many people tried to twist it, the truth belonged to her. She stopped by the river, the same spot where she'd once cried months ago. Now the water reflected city lights, endless, unbroken. She whispered into the wind. You can lose control of your story, but you can never lose who you are. And with that, Amelia Brooks walked away, not as a victim, not as a hero, but as a woman who finally understood that real power isn't loud. It's quiet, measured, unshakable. The storm eventually passed. Not with thunder, but with quiet acceptance. Weeks rolled by and the frenzy faded. The media found new scandals, new names to devour. And Amelia Brooks, once the headline, became what she'd always been: consistent, calm, and quietly exceptional. Her inbox was full again, this time with invitations, conferences, leadership panels, book deals. But she declined most of them. She didn't crave the spotlight anymore. She'd already learned what came with it: exposure, distortion, exhaustion. Instead, she focused on rebuilding, not her image, but her purpose. At work, the atmosphere had shifted. Where there had once been curiosity and gossip, now there was respect, the kind earned through endurance, not applause. Daniel stopped by her desk one afternoon, grinning. Guess who they've shortlisted for the regional director post? She looked up. Let me guess, someone quieter than I am. He chuckled. Actually, no, you. Amelia blinked. Me. The board voted unanimously. They said your handling of the crisis was exemplary. You didn't defend, you led. She smiled faintly. I just didn't lose my temper. That's what made it powerful, he said. Everyone else panicked. You stayed still and it worked. The news spread quickly. Congratulatory messages poured in, genuine, not performative this time. Yet, amid the joy, Amelia felt something heavier beneath the pride, a quiet ache she couldn't name. That evening, as she walked through the dimly lit corridors, she passed Sophie's old department, now occupied by someone else. For a moment, memories tugged. The laughter, the rivalry, the sting of that dinner night. It all felt like another lifetime. She took a deep breath. Closure wasn't a single moment. It was learning to walk past the ghosts without feeling their pull. A week later, Sophie invited her for lunch somewhere neutral, away from family eyes. They met at a small cafe, overlooking the Clifton Suspension Bridge. Sophie arrived first, nervously stirring her tea when Amelia walked in. For a second, their eyes met, two versions of the same storm, finally calm. You look peaceful, Sophie said. Amelia smiled. That's new. I watched your interview, Sophie continued. The one where you said forgiveness teaches grace. I replayed it 3 times. Amelia raised an eyebrow, studying me now. Sophie chuckled softly. Maybe, you're annoyingly quotable. For the first time, Amelia laughed freely without edge. Then Sophie's tone softened. Do you ever think about going public with our story? The real one, not the twisted version. Amelia paused. What would that change? It would show people the truth, Sophie said earnestly. How words can wound, how healing can look. Amelia shook her head. People don't want the real story. They want drama, conflict, villains. The truth is too quiet. Sophie leaned forward. Then maybe that's exactly why they need to hear it. Amelia looked at her sister, not the proud executive she once envied, but a woman trying to make amends. There was sincerity in her eyes, the kind that doesn't demand forgiveness. It earns it slowly. I'll think about it, Amelia said at last. That night, she sat by her window, notebook open, pen resting idle. For months, she'd written notes for strategy meetings, speeches, campaigns, all external things. But now, she wrote for herself. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's proof that you've survived long enough to understand. The words felt right, not rehearsed, just true. She thought about the upcoming promotion, the recognition, the endless possibilities that came with it. Then she thought about peace, how it had taken her years to earn it, and how fragile it was if she tied it to success. Maybe her next chapter didn't need to be louder. Maybe it just needed to be honest. Days later, she received a call from a local university. They were hosting a youth forum on ethics, resilience, and leadership, and they wanted her as a keynote speaker. She almost said no, but something about the word youth made her pause. Maybe sharing her journey could help someone avoid her pain. She agreed. The auditorium was modest, rows of eager faces, notebooks open, pens ready. When she stepped on stage, she didn't use slides or quotes. She just spoke softly, sincerely. I once thought silence made me invisible, she began, but it made me resilient. I thought revenge would bring balance, but it only delayed peace. And I learned, you don't always have to win the argument to win your life. The audience listened, still and wide-eyed. Forgiveness isn't the end of revenge, she continued. It's what happens when you've outgrown the need for it. Applause erupted, not wild but warm. After the talk, a young woman approached her. Miss Brooks, she said nervously, my sister and I haven't spoken in 2 years. Your story, it gave me hope. Amelia smiled, eyes glistening. Then promise me one thing, she said. What? When you speak to her again, don't go to win, go to understand. The girl nodded tearfully. As she left the hall, Amelia realized her pain had finally turned into purpose. That evening, she met Sophie again. Did you mean what you said at lunch? Amelia asked. About sharing our story, Sophie nodded. I did. Then let's do it, together. Sophie blinked in surprise. Really? Amelia smiled. If the world's going to tell stories, let's make sure ours teaches something worth remembering. Weeks later, an article appeared on The Guardian's weekend feature. Title, 2 Sisters, 1 Lesson, How Humiliation Turned into Healing. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't viral. But it was true. Readers called it quietly powerful. Some said it made them cry, others said it made them call their siblings. Sophie texted her later that night. For once, the story feels right. Amelia replied. Because we finally wrote it ourselves. Months passed. Life settled into something beautifully ordinary. Work, walks, family dinners. Peace wasn't a destination, it was a rhythm. Sometimes, people still recognized her in cafes or at events. You're Amelia Brooks, aren't you? They'd say. The woman from that article. And she'd smile, not because of pride, but gratitude. Yes, she'd reply, but I'm also just Amelia. One evening, she visited the Clifton Bridge again. the same spot that had witnessed her tears, doubts, and awakenings. The wind was colder now, the sky painted in deep autumn gold. Sophie joined her quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. They stood side by side, watching the city lights shimmer below. "Do you ever think we'd end up here?" Sophie asked. Amelia smiled faintly. "Not like this, but I'm glad we did." They clinked their cups softly. The bridge lights flickered across the water, reflection after reflection, endless and imperfect, just like them. And for the first time, both sisters understood. Forgiveness didn't erase the past. It rewrote its meaning. The following spring, Bristol looked different. Or maybe Amelia did. The city she once walked through with quiet anxiety now seemed to hum in rhythm with her confidence. Buses carried ads for conferences she was headlining. Students quoted her words in essays about leadership. Her inbox was full of invitations, some genuine, some opportunistic, but she read them all with the same calm smile. To lead with silence is to control the noise. That line, once scribbled in her journal during the lowest night of her life, had become a global mantra. Brands printed it on mugs, bloggers quoted it, a politician even misused it. But Amelia didn't correct anyone. Because power, she had learned, wasn't about being understood, it was about being remembered. At Langford Strategies, she'd become more than an analyst. She was now Director of Human Impact, a title she didn't chase but earned, after Marcus Langford himself stepped back, citing new creative directions. Rumor said the board preferred Amelia's poise. Others said Marcus simply grew tired of competing with the calm he couldn't crack. Either way, the balance had shifted, silently, beautifully. One morning, she walked into a meeting room overlooking the river, the same one where she'd once been dismissed as too emotional. Now, a dozen executives waited for her cue. She clicked the screen on, displaying a single phrase in white over black. "Reputation is currency, but integrity is wealth." She spoke clearly, packing slowly. "We can buy exposure. We can't buy trust. Every campaign that tries to manipulate emotion will fail. People don't need perfection. They need honesty." A pause. The room leaned in. Her tone never rose. Her presence did. When she finished, Daniel, now her senior strategist, whispered, "Every time you speak, it feels like a masterclass." She smiled. "It's just the truth, Daniel. I've already lived the consequences of losing it." But the higher she climbed, the more she noticed. The world still wanted drama. Interviews twisted her words. A TV host asked if she missed the thrill of revenge. She laughed softly. "I never had revenge, just resolution." Still, the internet preferred the first word. Revenge sold better than peace. She learned to stop explaining. Let them call it what they liked. She knew her truth. That evening, she received an email from the University of Bristol. They were hosting a leadership summit titled "Power, Grace, and the Modern Woman." They wanted Amelia as the keynote speaker. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. It wasn't the invitation that moved her, it was the date. Exactly 1 year since that dinner. The night her sister called her a failure. When the night arrived, the auditorium was full, hundreds of faces, some she recognized, others strangers. Soft lights, a glass podium, the quiet hum of anticipation. She took the stage. No notes, no slideshow, just presence. Her voice carried steady through the hall. "A year ago, I was called a failure, not by the world, but by someone I loved. And it broke something in me, only so it could rebuild something stronger." The audience was silent, even the air felt still. Failure doesn't define you, reaction does. Silence doesn't mean surrender, sometimes it's strategy. And grace is the loudest revenge you can have. A long pause. Then applause, not explosive, but heartfelt, the kind that starts slow and grows like understanding. Cameras flashed, hashtags were born. But Amelia didn't hear any of it. Her eyes had caught someone standing at the back of the hall, Sophie. She hadn't seen her in months. Sophie was dressed simply, holding a small notebook. She smiled shyly. After the event, they met by the backstage exit, under the same soft rain that had once witnessed their silence. "You were incredible," Sophie said. "You looked unstoppable." Amelia smiled faintly. "You came." "I had to. I'm teaching now communications. I tell my students about accountability, and your story fits every lesson." "Mine?" Amelia asked, surprised. Sophie nodded. Not the success part, the forgiveness part. The words hit harder than any applause. They stood for a long time, two sisters once divided by pride, now united by reflection. "Do you ever think," Sophie said quietly, "that maybe the real revenge is learning peace before they do?" Amelia's eyes softened. Maybe it's learning peace so they can too. Later that night, Amelia returned home, poured a cup of tea, and sat by her window. The city below glowed. The same streets that once felt too wide now felt just right. Her laptop pinged with messages, articles, interview requests. She closed it gently. Peace wasn't found in being known. It was found in no longer needing to be. She opened her journal, the same one she'd kept hidden during her hardest days, and wrote, "Power is not control. It's the ability to stay kind when you could have been cruel." She underlined it twice. The next morning, she arrived at work early, only to find Daniel waiting, a strange look on his face. "Amelia, have you seen this?" He handed her a printed memo. It was from the board. Marcus Langford had resigned fully, and his replacement was officially named, Amelia Brooks, managing director. Her breath caught. She hadn't lobbied for it, she hadn't even asked. But life, it seemed, was returning everything she once lost without her chasing it. She stared out the office window. The Avon shimmered in the morning light, waves gentle, unstoppable. "Congratulations," Daniel said quietly. She smiled. "Thank you." Then, after a pause, "Now let's make sure we never forget how we started." Because she knew, success without humility was just another failure in disguise. That evening, as she walked along the bridge, a street performer began to play violin, the same melancholic tune from months ago when she'd walked here, broken and unseen. This time, she stopped, listened, and left a folded note in his case. He opened it later. It said, "Thank you for playing that night. I didn't know it then, but your music kept me standing." Lay be. By the time she reached home, she wasn't the same woman who once sought to prove herself. She was the woman who no longer needed proof. Amelia Brooks had become what she was always meant to be. A reminder that silence can echo longer than applause. And dignity can outshine any revenge. The first morning in her new office, Amelia Brooks stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands resting lightly on the cool glass. The city spread below her like a living map of possibilities. Sunlight reflected off the Avon River, glinting like small rewards she had quietly earned. No one else could see the storm beneath her calm. Every victory had come with cost, the whispers, the doubts, the nights when silence was heavier than any insult. And yet here she was. Not triumphant in a loud, showy way, but quietly, fully herself. Her first day as managing director was a parade of decisions, appointments, and board meetings. Marcus Langford had officially stepped down, and the vacuum of authority could have invited chaos. But Amelia moved with precision. A junior analyst, nervously clutching a folder, stepped into her office. "Miss Brooks, there's a situation. One of our interns, they've been publicly humiliated online by a client. It's getting attention." Amelia closed her eyes briefly, feeling the echo of the past. She remembered that dinner, Sophie's words, the sting of being reduced to a single label, failure. And she remembered the shame of watching the world spin it further than any one person could. "Show me the details," she said softly. The analyst hesitated, then placed the printed screenshots on her desk. The images were cruel, edited captions, accusations of incompetence. The same tools of humiliation that had once nearly destroyed her were now being wielded against someone else. Amelia leaned back, thinking. Her first choice as leader wasn't strategy or profit. It was justice. She called the intern in. "You've done nothing wrong," Amelia said, keeping her voice even. "What happened is not a reflection of you. It's a reflection of someone else's inability to see the truth." The young person's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Thank you," they whispered. Amelia smiled faintly. "I know it doesn't make the fear go away, but sometimes having someone stand with you changes everything." By the end of the day, the client had been reprimanded, and the company issued a public correction. It wasn't revenge. It was protection, the kind of power that Amelia had never had when she needed it most. Later, Sophie came to visit the office. She hadn't been inside these halls for months. And yet, standing there in her simple coat, she looked at Amelia, not as the sister who had called her a failure, but as someone she admired and now depended upon. "I heard about the intern," Sophie said quietly. Amelia nodded. "It reminded me of everything I went through. I can't undo what happened to me, but I can make sure it doesn't happen to someone else." Sophie smiled. "You've really become unstoppable." Amelia shrugged softly. "I've just learned what quiet strength looks like." They walked the corridors together, side by side sisters again, but equal now in experience, in wisdom, and in grace. Weeks passed. Amelia's decisions began to ripple outward. The company adopted new mentorship programs, policies on workplace respect, and training that emphasized accountability and empathy. Her name became synonymous with integrity. Not flashy headlines or viral drama. Not revenge or spectacle. Just results, quietly powerful and undeniable. Yet even with this growing recognition, she never sought to dominate the narrative. She remembered what she had once lost, the ability to speak without distortion, to move without judgment, to exist without a label. And she guarded that fiercely, both for herself and for those she now protected. One rainy evening, Amelia returned to the Clifton Bridge. It had become her ritual, reflection, closure, and a reminder of the journey she'd survived. Sophie joined her again. They stood side by side, watching the water below, now reflecting winter's muted light. "You've really changed things," Sophie said softly. Amelia smiled, arms crossed against the chill. "I've changed myself first. Everything else just follows." Sophie laughed quietly. "You make it sound so simple." "It isn't," Amelia said. "It's deliberate. Every choice, every pause, it matters." Sophie fell silent, thinking. Then she said, "I used to envy you. That night, I thought you were nothing. But now I see you've become everything I never could be." Amelia's eyes softened. "You don't need to be me. You needed to forgive not me, but yourself." Sophie nodded. A long silence fell, filled only by the river's gentle flow and the occasional honk of a distant car. Months later, Amelia stood at a charity gala, not to be celebrated, but to support young women navigating career and adversity. The room was glittering, full of power and ambition. She could have commanded attention. She could have taken applause. Instead, she listened. She offered guidance quietly, letting her words land softly, deeply, in minds ready to grow. And somewhere in the crowd, she spotted Sophie, now a guest speaker herself, radiating her own brand of calm confidence. The sisters' eyes met, and for the first time in years, no words were necessary. Their story had passed through humiliation, revenge, and fear. It had survived the public eye, the media's twist, and their own doubts. And now, it was theirs to own fully, quietly, forever. The next morning, Amelia walked through Bristol's streets, light snow falling. She paused near the river, noticing the reflection of city lights dancing across the ripples. She whispered, not for anyone to hear, but for herself. "Power isn't measured by what you take. It's measured by what you choose to protect, to uphold, and to leave behind." And in that moment, she felt the final weight lift, the weight of being defined by anyone other than herself. Amelia Brooks had arrived. Not as a hero, not as a celebrity, not as someone who had sought revenge, but as a woman who had turned silence into strength, humiliation into wisdom, and pain into lasting legacy. The sisters walked home together that evening, sharing coffee and quiet laughter. The bridge behind them glimmered with streetlights, the river reflecting everything they had endured and everything they had become. No loud declarations. No dramatic triumph. Just peace. Just power. Just life lived fully, on their own terms. And somewhere in the stillness of the city, Amelia realized this was revenge transformed. Not destruction, not spectacle, but quiet, unshakable justice, lived through grace, integrity, and a legacy that would echo far longer than any insult ever could. The morning air was crisp over Bristol. Amelia stood once again by the Avon River, watching the water ripple over smooth stones. It had been months since the public storm had passed. The headlines, the online frenzy, the whispers in elevators, all now faded into quiet respect. She breathed deeply, feeling the weight of her journey lift further. This was no longer about revenge. It was about what she would leave behind. In the office, Amelia's presence carried more than authority. It carried responsibility. The mentorship programs she had initiated were flourishing. Young women, once hesitant to speak, now shared their ideas confidently. Every small success, every transformation she witnessed, was a reflection of what she had learned the hard way. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Sophie stepped in, holding a folder carefully. Her expression was open, calm, matured. "Morning," Sophie said softly. "I wanted to go through the new leadership initiatives with you. I've been thinking about how I can help more." Amelia smiled faintly, gesturing for her sister to sit. "You've been learning quietly," Amelia said. "Good. That's how real change begins, not with speeches, but with action." Sophie nodded. "I know, and I wanted to thank you, Amelia, for everything. You didn't just survive. You created space for others to thrive too." Amelia's eyes softened. "That's all any of us can do. It's not about being right or being powerful. It's about making things better than we found them." Later that week, Amelia attended a round table with young professionals. The discussion was about workplace ethics, resilience, and personal integrity. She spoke not as someone who had been humiliated, but as someone who had transformed pain into guidance. "Your reputation is not defined by what happens to you," she said quietly. "It's defined by how you respond, what you build from the pieces. And yes, sometimes the world misunderstands you, but your truth, your legacy, is yours to hold." The room was silent. Some nodded, some scribbled notes. A few eyes glistened. This was her quiet victory. Not the headlines, not the fame, but the impact. Her story was no longer hers alone. It had become a template for resilience, a map for anyone navigating shame, doubt, or betrayal. Even Sophie noticed the shift. One evening, they walked together along the city's lit streets. "Do you ever regret anything?" Sophie asked. Amelia shook her head. "Regret is for those who don't learn. Every humiliation, every mistake, it's a stepping stone. It's why I can walk calmly now, and why I can lift others without needing applause." Sophie smiled. "I've learned from you. Maybe that's my legacy too, to follow the example you set." Amelia glanced at her sister. "Your legacy is yours. You don't have to follow anyone. You only need to choose integrity and courage." The sisters walked on, side by side, the cold winter air softening their laughter. Back at the office, Amelia faced a new test. A major merger was in the works. Investors wanted results fast, and some board members pressed for aggressive, risky moves. She could have chosen to push, manipulate, or cut corners, and gain immediate praise. Instead, she paused. She consulted her team. She listened. And she chose the path that was right, not easy. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't viral, but it ensured the company, its people, and its culture would endure. That evening, Marcus Langford called. "Amelia, I see now, you've done what I never could," he said, with calm authority and principle. She simply smiled. I didn't do it for recognition, I did it for legacy. And in that moment, she realized legacy was the ultimate revenge. Not destruction of others, but the creation of something enduring, noble, and quietly powerful. Weeks later, the sisters organized a small gathering at Amelia's apartment. It was not a party, not a celebration of revenge. Just family, friends, and those whose lives they had touched along the way. Sophie raised a glass. To Amelia, who taught me that silence isn't weakness and strength isn't loud. Amelia's eyes misted. And to Sophie, who reminded me that even the hardest lessons can be learned with humility and grace. They clinked glasses. The room hummed with warmth, laughter, and understanding. The river of their shared past had carried them both to calmer waters. As the evening faded, Amelia stepped onto her balcony. The city stretched before her, calm and bright. She whispered into the wind. You can't control what people say or do. You can't erase the past, but you can shape the future. And that is everything. Sophie joined her, standing quietly beside her. No words were needed. The air held everything they had lived through: betrayal, anger, revenge, redemption, and now, peace. They watched the city together, not as sisters divided by pride or pain, but as women who had transformed their story into something stronger than any insult, louder than any fame, and more lasting than any revenge. And so, Amelia Brooks' journey concluded. The humiliation she once endured became a foundation for empathy. The revenge she sought transformed into wisdom and legacy. Sophie's redemption intertwined with her own, leaving the sisters closer, wiser, and profoundly human. The city around them moved on, oblivious to the quiet transformations inside those walls. But the people they touched, the young professionals, colleagues, and even strangers who heard their story, carried a piece of that power forward. Because true revenge, Amelia knew, was never about destruction. It was about rising above, creating lasting change, and claiming your own story. The wind over the Avon River whispered softly, carrying the echo of lessons learned. Power is not taken. It is earned. And it is shared. The winter sun dipped low over Bristol, casting golden light across the Avon River. Amelia and Sophie walked side by side along the familiar riverside path, their breath misting in the crisp air. It was quiet now, no social media frenzy, no boardroom tension, no echoes of past humiliation. Just the two of them, finally unburdened. Sophie spoke first, softly. I used to think I had to prove myself by putting you down, by being louder, prouder, but now I see that my pride was just fear. Amelia glanced at her sister, eyes steady. And now? Now, Sophie said, I want to build, not break, to lift, not judge. You showed me that strength isn't loud, it's deliberate, calm, compassionate. Amelia smiled. It takes courage to learn that, and you've had it all along, just buried under old habits. Sophie laughed quietly, the sound light and free. I've had the best teacher. That evening, Amelia hosted a small gathering at her office for the interns and young employees she had mentored. The room was modest, intimate, far from the glare of publicity. It was about real impact, not headlines. A young woman, nervously clutching her notebook, approached Amelia. Miss Brooks, I just wanted to say thank you. You've changed the way I see my own career, and myself. Amelia knelt slightly to meet her gaze. Remember this, what others say about you doesn't define you. Your choices, your actions, your integrity, that's your story. Protect it, grow it, and share it. The girl's eyes filled with tears. I will, I promise. Amelia nodded, sensing a quiet echo of her own journey. The humiliation she had endured, the revenge she had tempered into wisdom, was now shaping the next generation. Her story had become a bridge, a way forward for others who feared the same judgment she once faced. Later, Sophie joined Amelia in the balcony overlooking the city lights. Do you ever think about that night? Sophie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The dinner, the words, the chaos. Amelia leaned on the railing, eyes on the river. Yes, she admitted. It hurt, deeply, but it also taught me that my worth isn't given, it's claimed. That silence can be louder than any argument. That grace can outlast anger. Sophie nodded, her hand brushing lightly against Amelia's. I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of us how far we've come. Amelia smiled, finally at peace. We survived the worst of ourselves and the worst of the world, and we've turned it into something better. The sisters walked back inside, their laughter soft but certain. The office walls, once echoing with tension, now hummed with quiet energy, a testament to growth, resilience, and empathy. Amelia's eyes fell on a photo pinned to the wall, the two of them, years ago, at that fateful family dinner. The memory no longer brought shame. It was a reminder of transformation, of pain repurposed into wisdom. She whispered to herself, no one can steal your story. No one can diminish your legacy. Only you define it, and only you give it meaning. Months later, the company published a report highlighting the mentorship initiatives, ethical leadership programs, and policies Amelia had implemented. It was subtle recognition, no flashy awards, no viral headlines. But within the organization, the culture had shifted. People felt safe, valued, and empowered. Amelia walked through the office, observing colleagues confidently voicing ideas, interns mentoring each other, and employees smiling without fear. This was her revenge transformed, not destruction, but creation. Sophie joined her, carrying 2 coffees. You've built something lasting, she said softly, something that outlives headlines, gossip, even old grudges. Amelia took a sip, eyes sweeping the room. Yes, and now it's their turn to carry it forward. The sisters stood together, looking over a space no longer defined by humiliation or rivalry, but by legacy, trust, and quiet power. That night, Amelia returned to the river alone. Snow had begun to fall lightly, dusting the city in soft white. She knelt by the edge, letting the water ripple around her fingers, reflecting streetlights and stars above. For the first time, she felt fully unbound. The fear, the anger, the need for validation all gone. What remained was clarity, purpose, and peace. She whispered, letting the words float with the wind. This is my story, my choices, my power, my legacy. Not revenge, not resentment, but wisdom, grace, and strength that endures. From across the river, a soft voice called, Amelia. It was Sophie, smiling. They stood together once more, watching the city pulse with life. And in that quiet, snowy night, they knew, their journey had come full circle. No more labels, no more humiliation, no more doubt. Only peace, strength, and a legacy that would outlast them both. And with that, the Avon reflected their figures, sisters, survivors, architects of their own destiny.